check from 2010, the Reserve Bank was relatively successful in containing inflation. So this is one thing I wanted to show. Government debt, investment, and the role of inflation thresholds. Remember, I said inflation can be the lowest threshold is 3%, and then you can create an artificial one at 4.5, but the official one it's 6%. Now, let's look at number F. When inflation is above 6%, the T statistic is significant at 5. Anything above 2%, above 2, it's when the T statistic is above 2, this thing says the relationship between investment and debt is significantly negative. Now, when you look at D, there is no relationship. So that's what you want. And then also when you look at E, between 4.5% and 6%, it's relatively insignificant. So anything below 6%, when inflation is below 6%, the relationship becomes insignificant. But the most important thing is this one. I took material from 2 chapters. The first one has a model. You create a model. If you look at this thing, it has a zero line equilibrium, right? And then when you look at the graph, it's negative everywhere. Now, these kinds of graphs are forward-looking. Here, it's over 5 years, going forward. When it's negative like this, it's persistent. Tells you that the way investment behaves, the way it responds to increases in debt is negative. Now, what can we say about it? It comes to, number one, comes to the left. It's not exactly zero. It's like this. It means when you papa, things are giving I was really there. Oh, well, my doctor, oh. That's what it means. So what can you say about this graph, those two graphs? They're persistently negative. Persistently negative. Look at that one. That's after 20 quarters. As long as that, also generate that debt. Also, no, yeah, that's it. Right, in permanent trouble for at least 5 years. That's what it says. They don't lie. Not at all. Now, here, this information comes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equations, whereby you accommodate recession, you accommodate when inflation is out of the band or when it is between the band, and you check, you look at the impact. It's stronger when inflation is outside this 3 to 6%. It's negative. All of them. But it's the magnitude of where this inflation is. I'm almost done. So, what does that mean? It means the level of inflation must be controlled by the central bank so that we don't have these heavy impacts on investment because of debt. Because when you borrow, when let's say the National Treasury issue a long maturity bond, right? It must be paid, but in between, the government is paying holders of the debt, is paying coupons every 6 months. But if inflation is like Honachana got hit because of the oil prices, remember, in all the economies of the world where you find fiat money, money not protected through gold or anything like that, in any and all modern economies, there are two things. You are chasing the price, you are chasing time. Quantities are just. And we're talking prices of bonds, of stocks, goods and services, wages, we're talking prices of capital, and all that. So, price stability matters. But if I were to be fancy about it, I would say price stability is a public good. It is a public good. So when people start talking about nationalizing the Reserve Bank, they're talking nonsense. Now, let's look at the blue line. It says, after a year, this blue line, it says, after a year or so, you will have a positive, there will be a positive relationship between investment and debt, government debt. When inflation is above 6%, it's permanently negative. So you can look at these thresholds and you can come up with this. But when there are no thresholds, if the government is so bad, the Reserve Bank is so bad, can't control inflation, it means investment will remain negative. So there was a lot of talk this afternoon about investment that can slow down electricity. I guess what we should have done was to lobby. I think there are those gas fields, Virginia, Tennessee area. When you are like Saudi Arabia and you have a ton of oil, you put a surcharge, a tax surcharge, so that the money comes to that specific geographic area, and you are able to rehabilitate, and you are also able to use the taxes as free money. But that didn't happen in every state. So all that money, and we're talking to, it's gonna be, the initial estimates were like 200 billion. And I don't know if you're aware, that's a small amount, to 200 billion. So they have been discovering a lot of this gas. In the case of Namibia, 6 trillion. People are moving towards Namibia because they found a lot of oil. And then I did small calculations, 6 trillion, that's an initial estimate. Now, this is a fancy picture. In post-PhD economics, there is something called counterfactual analysis, where you open and shut certain channels and then check whether the mechanism amplifies or attenuates whatever variable. You don't have to know anything about this other than to know that it's you take an equation and you remove a variable. That's called counterfactual analysis. But to be able to do that, to generate this thing, it's a lot of work. It can take 6 months. Now, when it's like this graph is negative, but it says if inflation is controlled, fairly controlled, the impact of debt to investment gets limited. So here we talk about amplification effects. Are they low in terms of magnitude or no? Yeah, I think I'm done. So, yeah, I'm done. So the conclusions are this. Debt crowds out investment because debt creates an environment where you are constantly almost in a high inflation environment. Remember what I said? I said at any point in time, as long as the country relies on fiat money, you are chasing time, you are chasing the prices. So the change in the prices must be controlled. It must be controlled. Otherwise, the value of the currency can depreciate so much. The low inflation regime neutralizes the negative effects of increases in debt on investment, whereas the high inflation regime amplifies the negative effects. So we need to keep inflation low, otherwise we are going to struggle. Now, the thing is that if you cannot perform that mechanism that I talked about, the one of asking the Reserve Bank to buy the debt so that we don't rely on destroying households and companies because we want to cut. If you cannot do that, you are in trouble almost completely. Price stability matters, and that monetary policy has a role to play in minimizing the size of the effects. And that's the end of the presentation.
Dr. Gwen, I'm not sure where is Chomani now. I will take over for now.
And these are the references.
No, thanks, Doc. No, thank you very much, Doc. Very interesting, very much technical for me. But the one issue that I've noted, the gist for me, is the relationship between inflation and government debt. And other issue that you raised, which is interesting, I'm sure our economists, our technical guys will raise this issue. You also
alluded to the issue of when you are in an environment of high inflation, the issue of quantity easing vis-a-vis the spending cut that we are doing as national, as treasury. So it will be interesting. I'm sure colleagues will raise issues around that. I know during, it was at the time of Barack Obama, I can't remember, 2008 financial crisis, there was an issue of quantity easing in the US. So you guys, I'm sure you have dotted down some questions around those issues. Colleagues, I'm not sure where's Tate Shomane. It's late. We'll have to move. I'm not sure if he also indicated to you the apology of our colleague who was supposed to moderate here, Advocate Musia. He had to leave because of other commitments. So thank you very much, Dr. Mokoena. I think our next presenter, it was supposed to be the issue of the Innovation Hub. I'm told, remember initially that was supposed to be our venue, but we had to move to this site. So I'm told we're just going to be taken around the issues, whatever that is happening in that innovation. There are a lot of things that are done by CUT in terms of innovation. We have partnered with them as provincial government. So I'm not sure if we're still going to do that, but while we don't have confirmation of that, for the sake of brevity, we can move to Ndate Chulufelo David Mundirapula to come and share with us his work entitled Informal Economy in Promoting Local Economic Development, the case of Mangaung Central Business District. I would have liked Ntate Chomane to have been given the profile of Ntate Chulufelo, as we have done with the other colleagues. Unfortunately, I don't have with me, but we can still do that after your presentation before we get into Q&A session. Okay, let's welcome Ntate Chulufelo colleagues. A round of applause. Are you ready to go, colleagues? Okay, welcome. I'm saying to Mr. Chomane, we are struggling here with regard to loading. So I'm saying to him, let's give it to Chulufelo. I'm sure he's more than IT savvy, more than him and me. So, and he has proven that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I've been introduced, my name is David Mudirapula. I don't know, should I do the introductions or you do it after, like what I do and so on? Okay. I am an academic facilitator at the University of the Free State and a lecturer at Rosebank College. And I teach subjects on municipal administration, intergovernmental relations, and public administration, whether in theory and in action also. So the presentation is based on my master's research findings, which was on the informal economy in promoting local economic development. So ladies and gentlemen, I deal with my 2K, the new generation. Whenever you have a question that they feel like you are taking them, they will tell you that I don't have parents. So you rather keep that question to yourself. So with that being said, earlier on, there were questions around the second economy and the informal economy. Those are two fancy concepts that are being used to deprive people to their townships. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is not the case. There's a lot of potential that has been untapped as far as the informal economy is concerned. The economy itself can contribute a lot as far as job creation and even to move people out of poverty. And another thing that I've noted with all presentations is that we need to seek developmental alternatives. And fortunately enough, investing in the informal sector or informal economy is one of them. Why does it move? Okay, the introduction as far as the overview, we'll have an introduction, there's a problem statement. We also have aims and objectives, a literature review, which I will just touch on the definitions so that it happens that some of us don't know what the local economy is or the informal economy. And then the research methodology that we used, summary of findings and a recommendation and conclusions. Ladies and gentlemen, in all our walks of life, we have bought something or used something from a person selling on the streets. During your young age at high school or primary school, some of us used to buy fat cakes from a lady who would come during break time to sell outside the gates of the school. From you growing up, being sent by your parents to the fruit and veg market to buy vegetables for that Sunday plate, 7-color plate. From you growing up, ruining your shoes from playing netball or soccer and relying on someone to do shoe repairs, a plumber and so on. Those people fall under the broader concept of the informal economy. Now, all these people, the informal economy as it is, were first discovered in 1973 by the International Labour Organization. And somehow they thought once we have economic growth, once we modernize the economy, somehow the informal economy will also disappear. But then, truth of the matter is that that is not the reality. The more the formal economy tends to grow, the more the informal economy also tends to grow. And in South Africa, this has become our reality. A lot of people can't access jobs in the formal economy. be it because of qualifications. If they have qualifications, there's an issue with entry requirements. Some of our people don't have the education, so they rather open their own things on the pavements, at their yards, and so on and so on. So that alone, for us, created the emphasis that we need to investigate exactly how can we tap on the potential of the informal economy and also contribute to the local economy, because somehow all the things that happen in the formal economy tends to connect specifically or directly with the responsibilities of the local government, be it in promoting economic and social well-being or social development, be it in ensuring that we live in a healthy and safe environment, and also ensuring that people do actually participate in municipal processes. So that created the emphasis for us. And also, like I said, there's a whole lot of potential as far as the informal economy is concerned. In Kenya, for instance, the economy employs at least 6 million people, which is higher than the 2 million of formally employed people. Now that's a lot. And also, there's also a potential for the economy, as it is, to get as much as they can as far as the GDP is concerned. The MEC was here saying that we need to generate revenue. There's a problem where by 2024, social grants will actually, that's what she did, I think. So we need to move towards a direction where we can tap on the potential of the informal economy, because there's revenue sitting there. Municipalities can get a lot as far as municipal revenue is concerned also. So it's not only about the national government, so it's all about the municipality also. But then once we tend to ignore it, leave it out of policy discussions, then we create a problem where we see a lot of informal activities will be carried out in the informal economy. Because people will see that, why do I need to go and work for the government? Why do I need to go and work for the private sector? Whilst I can open my own thing, have my own money, and do exactly to a certain extent the same thing that I would do if I was working in the formal economy. So we need to tap on the potential so that we avoid that. And then there are also environmental problems, guys. Because the minute we leave it out, we also create a perception where people can say that the CBD is dirty because of people trading on the streets, without realizing that the municipality also has a role there. If you go to the CBD in Bloemfontein, it is dirty. There is garbage piling up almost in each and every robot. Whose problem is that? If the municipality doesn't do its role, people will do as they please also. But then why do we need to also, why we needed to also research on this thing? Is because in Mangaung, the street trading accounts for 46% of total informal employment in Mangaung. That is higher than in Gauteng and eThekwini. And also we need to reveal how the economy can generate economic opportunities and create multiplier effects, so that at the end of the day we can say we left no one behind. Because remember, in that economy, we have a lot of poor people working in that economy. A lot of people that can't even access those opportunities in the formal economy. And also we need to unearth the economic, social, environmental, political, and operational challenges holding back the informal economy. And more important to note is that this kind of study has not been conducted in the Free State, and particularly Mangaung, since the COVID-19 outbreak. So that created an opportunity for this study to be conducted. Then in terms of the aims, I know in terms of the topic, we said the case study is on Mangaung Central Business District. However, the study on its own created an opportunity for us to include people operating in the location. That allowed us to answer or to evaluate the approach towards the informal economy and how that has affected livelihoods. And also in terms of recommendations, we can make recommendations that are holistic, instead of saying we're only going to concentrate on the CBD. because a lot of times we see that the municipality and all the other stakeholders try to support a lot of times people operating in the CBD and leave those in the location behind. Then in terms of the literature review, LED, as it is a comprehensive and integrated community approach in which local government works together with the community-based organizations, private sector, and the public to achieve long-term growth and development. Now, the World Bank goes further to say that it is a process in which the community, businesses, formal non-governmental sector collaborate to improve economic growth and create job creation. In this regard, LED focuses on increasing competition and ensuring sustainable and inclusive growth. But then the truth of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is that even if we can say that LED is working towards creating inclusive growth, we don't know whose local economic development it is exactly. If you go to the to communities or the locations, there's no development happening as far as economic activity. You go there, a lot of times you meet with foreign nationals who have penetrated the market. They no longer only own supermarkets. They now even sell company. Taverns are under their leadership also. So there's a lot happening. Even when it comes to real estate, it is foreign nationals. So we need to move to a position where we put the face to local economic development. Down two approaches can be followed as far as LED. It can be pro-growth or market-led, or it can be pro-poor. Now with pro-growth, it's all about making the place attractive to investment. Dr. Mokoena said, investment is not coming. So who are we attracting exactly? But then the problem is that even though we attract businesses, they don't guarantee sustainable jobs for our people. And they don't necessarily benefit the poor. Because once they leave with their things. People go back to square one. Square one being the informal economy for them. Then the other approach we have is pro-poor, where that one is more people-centered. But then even though it's people-centered, we need to get to a point where we achieve an equilibrium between the two approaches so that we take from the two advantages of it. And then LED, what it is, the International Labour Organization considered the informal sector to include all remunerative work, both self-employed and wage-employed, that is not registered, regulated or protected by existing legal or regulatory framework, and non-remunerated work undertaken in incoming producing enterprise. The people there are not protected by labor laws and they tend to earn lesser than in the formal economy, obviously, lack of health care and work benefits. And what characterizes it is an ease of entry. People can just go in and open their market there. There's also reliance on indigenous resources, family ownership enterprises, small-scale operation, labor-intensive and adaptable technology, skills required outside the formal school system, meaning that even if you don't have an education, you can still open your own business. And then unregulated and competitive markets. Then 4 schools of thought exist to tell us why the informal sector is growing. We have the dualist that will tell you that jobs are not created in the formal economy, so people would rather open their own thing. We have structuralist that will tell you that the proliferation attributes to the proliferation of the informal economy to capitalist development rather than economic growth. And then we have the dualist that will also tell you that people go to the informal economy because they want to avoid regulations. They don't want to pay tax, which is what we discovered during the interviews with informal traders, even the Informal Sector Association chairperson and the secretary, that a lot of people that they meet, they will tell you that, now I don't want to pay tax. I don't even make that much to pay tax. Some of them don't even know the threshold for you to have in order to pay tax. That is the problem that we also encountered with our informal economy participants. And then we have voluntarilists that will just say, now I'm going there. Regardless if I have a qualification or not, I'm going to open my own thing. Then globally, we hear that about 2 billion people work in the informal sector. Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America are the highest in terms of informal employment. The others are the lowest because of their economic performance. It could be that they are creating more jobs in the formal economy, or they have managed to allow to create an environment where people can easily transition to the formal economy. Then in terms of South Africa, although we have a small rate compared to Mozambique, Mali, and Kenya, our informal economy is growing. Unemployment is a phenomenon for us. There's a lot of graduate students that are sitting at home. They don't have employment and so on. The only option for them is to join the informal sector. Some of our parents raised us from the money that they made from the informal sector. Hence I said, what they said about once we have economic growth and have modernization, the informal sector will disappear, is not a real thing. Because even though people who have been in the sector for more than 10 years, some of them are still are. There's that lady that you know in your area that has been selling fat cakes for more than 20 years, still doing that today. And then also, in South Africa, the sector accounts for 2.5 million people, making up to 20% of total employment. Wholesale, retail, and trade sectors account for 44% of activities, followed by services. And in all sectors, the informal sector, in all sectors, Black South Africans, account for the most people that are in the sector. That is a problem. We can account that to what happened, the apartheid policies, as far as segregation was concerned. We can account that to a lot of factors as far as the economic history of South Africa is also concerned. But then, because of us not being able to create employment in the formal sector, we push people also to survivalist strategies. Like I said, unemployment is one of the things. Poverty is also one of them. Then in terms of policy, the advocate mentioned something that as far as the NDP, there's a whole lot that needs to be done. The NDP will tell you that they want to create 11 million jobs by 2030. They want to ensure that by 2030, the unemployment rate is at least a 6%. Now, considering where we are and where we're going, that's a bit unrealistic. The informal employment, although it is recognized as far as its role in creating employment, the NDP does not provide structures and support measures on how we can ensure that informal sector get to a point where they contribute to employment. And as far as evidence-based research and planning, the advocate and even the MEC mentioned that we tend to move from program to program. Whether that is evidence-based or not, it's another question. And as far as the GEAR did mention the informal economy. It included informal economy in its economic analysis, employment projections and so on. But once we move to the NGP, we put the informal economy aside and focused on SMEs. That is the problem that we face as far as the informal economy is concerned and policy. We tend to leave it out. Now, in the Free State, we have the Local Economic Development Integrated Bill that I heard it has been tabled before the legislature. During our interviews, I did ask the Informal Economy Association, the chairperson, and even the informal traders whether they were engaged as far as the bill is concerned. I was surprised to hear that today, that participation is only happening now. But those people told me that they were never included. I did ask them also, in any bylaw, or in any policy, have you ever been engaged? They will even tell you that, yes, they have engaged us, but that's where the bus stopped. So whatever contribution that they made was never taken as far as implementation is concerned. Then the challenges that they face, there are economic challenges, capital to start a formal business, finance to grow your own business, and there's also unemployment. Socio-cultural, there's gender discrimination because there's a whole lot of women operating in the sector. There's crime and violence. For example, there's xenophobia, policy and political and policy, lack of recognition, then operational transportation of goods, storage, lack of municipal services, lack of suppliers, and sewage, severe weather conditions. And as far as the research methodology, we wanted to exclude this slide from the presentation, but we felt it is necessary because a lot of studies have been done as far as the informal economy and local economy is concerned. However, a lot of them focus only on the municipality and informal traders in the CBD. For our study, we moved on to include the provincial government. We went to the STIA, asked them, what are you doing as far as the local economy is concerned and the informal economy? We included CEDA because of the training that they provide and even the equipment they tend to provide to informal traders. And then also, obviously, we have informal traders. We have 10 in the CBD and 7 in the location. The reason why we have a low number of participants in the location is because a lot of market stalls there are owned by foreign nationals. So when you come and interview them, they feel like somehow you are an official from the police or somewhere. That creates a problem. If that's not the case, some South African person has sold their stall to them. So they can't even give you answers as to what is happening in Boni. Then the summary of findings, we found that the reasons for starting a business is unemployment. There's also an issue with regulations. There's also an issue of finance. A lot of people in the Free State also, in the CBD in most cases, have been in the sector for about 20 to 30 years. That's a lifetime. That's how old I am, 30 years. And then challenges, the same as the ones that are faced national. Severe and unpredictable weather conditions. Although the CEDA and the STIA will provide them with gazebos and so on, that is not a sustainable solution for them. A gazebo, when it's hot, stands a chance of being damaged. When there's strong winds, like we have had in the past days, it is a challenge for them. Now, as far as severe conditions also, I wish I had a picture there to show you. Whilst we were doing interviews in the CBD, it started to rain. One of the guys told us, I need to pack my things and go home now. We asked him, have you made enough for you to go home? No. So for him, it becomes a challenge because they eat from cash to mouth. So him not being able to make that man is a problem. And then also there's infrastructure and storage, hygienic and cleanliness. That's where the municipality comes in. The CBD is dirty. And not only the CBD, even the location. I can't even remember the last time I saw a truck going around my Gasi. That is a problem for these people. There's a lot of sewage running around the streets. Not only in the CBD, also in the location. Then there's issues with business registration and informal trading bylaws that are not conducive to these people. There's funding foreign nationals' entry into the market. Foreign nationals, they just come and open where they want. That is a problem for them. One of the participants revealed that he did go to the municipality to ask for assistance to deal with a foreign national that has opened in front of them. But instead, they were told, we can't help you, leaving that person with a problem. And then also, in terms of the findings, we have COVID-19 impact on livelihoods and business. Remember, the study started in 2020 and only stopped now in 2024. So we had to check, as far as income, what happened, because they had to close their businesses. they lost an income. Although there was a relief fund meant for informal traders, some of them couldn't even access that funding because of permits. It was revealed that some of them were asked, no, you can bring your old permit, but then it's a problem for someone who still doesn't have one. Some of the people that we interviewed said, Bonnet, they canceled that permit thing because they felt like once I have a permit, then I need to be regulated. And then at the same time, I stand a chance of my kids losing their bazaar because the government will realize that I have a business. Then there's support. Support is, we felt like it's not enough for informal traders. There needs to be more support. Not only from the municipality, but all the stakeholders that can be involved. Then stakeholder engagement is not enough. Although in the CBD they said, no, we tend to see these people come to us and address us. In the location, they've never seen these people. And then also, from the municipal side, they mentioned that they fear going to the CBD because of violence. How people will react to them being there in the CBD. And then collaboration between stakeholders, a whole lot of challenges that we got from collaboration is that the municipality is not participating as far as collaboration is concerned. There's also a challenge as far as the association is concerned. They tend to boycott meetings. And then transition to formalization, which we felt it is important to ask, do you want to transition? Do you support informal businesses to transition? And then the answer we got is that they don't encourage them to formalize. That was a government official and a member of the association. That once they formalize, now they create a problem where these people can get easily identified and harassed. From a government official, they mentioned that we don't encourage them because once they formalize, then they will have to pay. And then the current bylaws have not been amended yet. Informal economy participants are excluded. There's capacity constraints. People dealing with bylaws, some of them don't even know what the bylaw entails. Then non-cooperation from stakeholders in hinder effective implementation. And then as far as the LED, there's a need to hire people with skills. Lack of private sector investment in local economic activities is a concern. But also there's a lack of linkage between the municipality and the private sector. Lack of political will and political interference. Some of the things are done because of political scoring. Some of them are not done because they don't benefit someone or something we don't know. Then strategies are silent on the informal economy. The informal economy can be referenced to, but there's nothing being said on how will it be supported. How is it budgeted for in terms of the IDP? And then also, as far as Mangaung realized, there's no LED strategy in place at the moment. Then as far as the recommendations, the main recommendations for the municipal metro to Mangaung Metro to promote LED and ensure informal traders participate in LED activities. The municipality can accomplish this by implementing the following study recommendations. Recognizing informal traders in the location. Promote mixed economy. The focus on the formal economy alone is not enough. We need to also tap in onto the potential of the informal economy, like I said. Increase the flow of information on business support and opportunities, infrastructure provision, issue municipal business permits, improve coordination and collaboration between departments, support agencies, and the informal economy association. They need to amend and implement bylaws on informal street trading and capacitate the LED unit. We also have recommendations for street traders. A lot of them, they are not informed about what is happening, what is available for them. But then that is a problem that we saw. It's an individual problem, not an organization problem. People no longer see the benefit of engaging with municipalities because things are still the same later on. But then we say that we need to try to get them to a point where they can say, no, I want to know. And also there are recommendations for DST and Dr. Mokoena. We need to hold information sessions with people, informal traders. We learned that there are sessions that are being held in the location, mainly Pame. But what about those that operate in Dinaweng, Pumulong, and so on? They also need to know what is happening, what is available for them. And then the department also needs to have its own database of informal traders. We did ask a question on whether the department has a database so that we can get the number at least of how many informal traders operate in Mangaung. There's no database. Then there's recommendation for CEDA. They need to seek collaboration with higher learning institutions in the region. They must publish success stories of informal traders that underwent training. They must also develop a database of their own. Then informal association, they need to increase their social media appearance because people don't even know there's an association in place for them. They don't even know the role of the association or who is even in the leadership of the association. They must also develop a database, collaborate with informal economy participants, more particularly in increasing their bargaining power when negotiating access to finance. Then recommendation for future research, we realized that there's a limitation, we got a limitation where we could not actually attract or reach a wider audience. So we saw that for future study, for those who want to do their PhDs, they can push this study and try to increase their research sample. And also, in terms of the methodology, they need to adopt a mixed method so that we can know exactly what is happening and how can we tap on the potential. Because remember, the focus was only on the CBD and battle location. There's a mall in Hededa. There's a mall when you move towards phase 6. What happens to those people that operate there as informal economy people? Then there's a need to investigate further why locals sell or rent out their stalls or backyard shops to foreign nationals. And how has this impacted on livelihoods of both South African people and foreign nationals? Then the third one, the study reveals some elements of urban migration of informal traders. Therefore, we suggested that the research must be undertaken to see how the facilitation of LED can be used to bridge the gap between urban and rural migration. We need to develop also places such as Van Staden's. It cannot be that all people come to Mangaung, there I can sell. We need to develop LED that side also. And with that, there's further investigation. The investigation can be further extended to include the flow of migrants from Lesotho to South Africa, because a lot of informal traders are from Lesotho. Then in terms of conclusion, the COVID-19 has only reinforced this sense of agency on how can we tap on the potential of the informal sector. Its crushing impact of informal activities worldwide has highlighted the need for government to provide a lifeline large segments of the population not covered or not well covered by existing social protection programs. Also, there's a need to explore the development alternatives that will lead to greater inclusivity of the economic development and economic growth. And one way to do this is to invest in the informal economy. Thank you.
I think so. Director Man, have we loaded the other one?
Yeah, the other one is, I think,
Loaded,
is.
okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Colleagues, another round of applause for Chulufelo. Thank you very much, Chulufelo. I think you've, in your recommendations for future research topics, it's very much interesting. I'm sure the students who are here, they will consider those recommendations. You know, one issue that is interesting for me, we are told by analysts, your economists and so forth, that our tax base in the country is shrinking. So if we have the informal sector that is employing more than 2.5 million people, so the question for me is, how do we formalize it so that it can have the ability or the potential to access your financing, whether from government or from the private sector? So it's one question maybe that colleagues may consider, the researchers going forward, so that we are able to broaden our tax base as a country. It's a big problem. You will have heard earlier on our MEC talking to the issue of the why we have entered the issue of spending, of cutting expenditure in the current financial year. It's because of those issues, the shrinking revenue in terms of the tax that is collected by SARS. Someone was talking about the government bonds. Those are the instruments that we use as government to cover deficit. If, for instance, our projected expenditure, estimated expenditure for this year is about 6 trillion, and our revenue that is estimated is 5.5 trillion. So that gap of 500 billion must be covered. So how do we cover that? We cover that by going to the markets and issuing out bonds. So the biggest challenge that we are having now, there's no appetite for those government bonds. So it's a big issue. Hence, they are talking about cutting spending. Dr. Mukwena was talking about quantity easing. He has just left. I wanted us to talk about the issue of quantity easing. It has been a problem in the US. Colleagues, maybe let's ask then Tate Moatludi to come and present his paper. I think his paper is on Northern Cape Township Enterprise Study, Township Economy, what it entails and support needed. Tate Moatludi he was our intern many years back within our Economic Analysis Directorate, and he left us, and he's now with Northern Cape. I think it's Economic Research, and I'm not sure it's Economic Development. Yeah, Department of Economic Development, that side. So welcome, Tate Moatludi. We have decided to come together just to combine the three presentations, then we'll have one Q&A session, just for the sake of time. Tate Moatludi, the platform is yours, sir. Thank you. Round of applause, colleagues, please.
Oh, thanks. I don't know if I should call you Bradford or Mr. Mgoma or Steve Vovo. All those niceties. Mr. Chomani, when I got the program, I asked myself a simple question. I now work at the forgotten province of the Northern Cape. And I was asking myself, why am I last? Is it because all the time the province is always considered last? So is it the reason? And unfortunately for me, I have the opportunity, or the not so nice opportunity, of being the one that holds you for an extra hour. And apologies. Apologies on that score. Mine is a simple one. We did apologies, I don't like mics. Generally, I don't like mics. That's why I dodged becoming a pastor. Yeah. No, I was supposed to be one. I dodged. They are still calling me, and I'm still dodging. I'm still dodging even till today. So mine is on the Northern Cape Enterprises Study, Township Enterprises Study. And this is how because similar to Ntatempo, I'm not a fan of township economy as a concept. And thus, I deliberately said what it entails and what support is needed. So I needed also to call it, align myself to the vocab that is gradually growing in terms of economic development. That they also highlighted it in terms of his presentation when he talked to the effect of LED and the informal
economy. A bit of background. It is often understood that businesses in metropolitans, unfortunately for some of us in the Northern Cape, we do not have a metropolitan, are often elevated, whilst there's less known about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the township and how to support the primarily micro necessity-based businesses. Necessity-based business, because like that alluded to, some volunteer themselves to enter the sector, some they gravitate towards the sector based on the fact that they do not have employment opportunities elsewhere. And this, working for economic development, is an issue that comes often from the DTIC, our big brother in Pretoria, your trade, industry, and competition. And the Deputy Minister, Mayor Nomalungelo Gina, is on the mission of ensuring that township as well as rural economies find prominence out there in the world. And she placed this as one of the key vehicles that we could utilize in us after COVID-19, as one of the vehicles that we could utilize in terms of us having a economic recovery and reconstruction program. So she said that for the program to succeed, we should not spare any effort and ensure that the township economy, as colloquially used, finds expression in most of our documents, more so for us, those who are in economic development. And obviously, most people are aware of the Gauteng explosion in terms of their advancement, in terms of how they've gazetted their own township economy policy development. Even in KwaZulu-Natal, there has been some groundswell in terms of this. And the Northern Cape, as any other province in the country, felt also obliged to also acknowledge the significance of this township economy. And us as a department, we were asked to profile the township enterprises and to sort of tie our own, call it a mission, in terms of the studies. There were two initiatives that this work that we are currently doing, it should lead to us developing a provincial township economy strategy, as well as us developing a mechanism to support the very same. Because it's always that we have these strategies, the niceties, but we fail to have the implementation plan or the make-do, things that will lead us to having all our efforts come to bear fruit. This way. Now, grappling with the concept of township economy, one needs to also do a bit of digging. And I reflected on a beautiful piece of work. I'm one of those people who hardly pronounces that the National Treasury is doing good work. But on this piece of the cities report, I feel that they've done some nice work. I don't know if the colleagues are aware of the nicety, the city's economic outlook report, which is actually a good report that the National Treasury is working on. So according to the work, they say a township is a dense urban settlement, usually at the periphery of centers of commercial and industrial activity. And moreover, even the past 29 years, we haven't nipped this in the bud. As economic researchers, as development planners, we haven't said to ourselves, let's relook at the old apartheid spatial planning. We've sort of continued. And even if you were to go to any location around the country, you'd find that more and more of our townships are veering further away from the central or the commercial activities. And this talks to the death in the social, infrastructural, and economic costs that were due to the ineffective urban planning and that are often underestimated and have obviously become concrete. Thus, we know that our townships, even here in Bloom, I'm sure now we are skipping Group 4. We are going towards Diversdorp. Now, as a concept, like I said earlier, Gauteng was one of the leaders in terms of trying to granularize the concept of township economy, try to make it more palatable, if I were to call it that. And in their seminal work in 2015, they refer to the township economy as those enterprises and markets that are found in the townships. So basically, anything that happens in the township tends to be part of the township economy. And for me, I enjoyed the earlier discussion because I looked at another work that I'm also doing in terms of the circular economy, because for me it was like, but I also use circular economy. And if you were to ask me what's a circular economy, I'm literally going to tell you that it's recycling. It's people taking the very same bottles and then making sure that it's an economy on its own. But we can debate what constitutes and what defines an economy. Moreover, these are enterprises that operated by township entrepreneurs to meet primarily the needs of township communities, and therefore can be understood as a township enterprise as distinguished from those that are operated outside the township. And also, like I earlier alluded to, the National Treasury study also indicated that the township economy, for all intents and purposes, refers to enterprises and markets, similar to what Gauteng says, that are based in there. So it's not a Mohau or a Ms. Mamapula, a Ms. Works conceiving this concept, but it's what is there in the public domain. And it's also said to be meeting social and economic needs of those in the vicinity. And the basis of cooperation as well as solidarity has been the defining features of a township enterprise. And I can anecdotally tell it that I was raised by my mother who owned a tuck shop. And obviously there's those who cooperated and those who were with us in solidarity often elevated us, as you see me here. This slide just highlights, just that we don't have a pointer. The issues that emanate from having a township economy is the issue that was raised by the previous speaker, regulation, which is very key. And Mayor Pukunzi earlier in her presentation talked to the fact that what do we call a public good? And I was, in terms of leadership, and I was thinking of Moore as the scholar, as well as Fukuyama, as well as Huntington, those political economists most people would know of. But for me, what is fundamental in this regard is economic activity. Is something happening? Is there something? You leave your house to go to the Bangladeshi store owner to buy your coffee. That's an economic activity. Whether it's an exchange of a product for a denomination in this in this context, money. And obviously, social organization. How do we rally up around this economy as a whole? And the spatial dynamics of South Africa also come to the fore. We cannot talk to South Africa and then we fail to understand that we have a past that said you will stay at the periphery. You will not be an active participant in the economy. So we also need to also highlight that. And obviously, like in Tate, one of the comments earlier, is making sure that they become party to the national economy or the wider economy and be competitive in that regard. So the purpose of the study is to investigate as well as conceptually understand what the township economy is, like I highlighted earlier, and what the challenges faced by the township entrepreneurs. Moreover, understand what sustains these businesses, the township businesses. And by extension, obviously, if the township economy tends to exist, township businesses tend to exist, by extension, the township economy will also be seen to be thriving. And in my earlier articulation, I talked to the fact that the culmination of this study will contribute to the development of the provincial township economic strategy for the Northern Cape, as well as assist us in terms of developing mechanisms for us to assist the businesses in the township. So the research objectives for the study were objectively understand the hindrances to the township economy. Also, like I've tried to do, define the concept of township economy. And for this study, or for this section of the presentation that I'm making today, we looked at three distinct districts in the Northern Cape. That is your John Ntaulo Gaetsewe, your ZF Makau, as well as Pixley-Kaseme district. For those who are not in the know, John Ntaulo is the Kuruman Katu area, which is largely responsible for the iron ore that China consumes from the country. ZF Makau is the Uppington area, where we tend to have our grape wines. The French love them as much as they make their own, but they tend to buy from us there. The Pixley-Kaseme is just here, DR, and it's where sheep, the Karoo lamb, if you are a connoisseur of good meat, Karoo lamb, so that's the sort of in a nutshell, the areas that we looked at. Obviously, to contextualize the current challenges confronting the township entrepreneurs, understand previous assistance. There has been assistance provided, and we needed also to understand whether there has been, the township entrepreneurs were able to benefit from those. The study is I call it a mixed method approach. It delves in us having a face-to-face interview, and most will say that tends to be qualitative. And we also utilize data from IHS for some of our analysis. And in a way, it's a snowball type of study, snowball purposive sampling, meaning that we literally go to the gentleman, and then the gentleman says, no, there is another store there, go and interview there. Because we unfortunately, as a department, did not also previously have a database, which is also a nice addition, because we have now over 100 and almost 150 towards our database. And we use Excel as well as Stata to understand the kind of results that we could gather, and we use the Stata survey data analysis tool as our analysis tool. This is the areas that I was talking to. Your DR, which is Pixley Kaseme, your Kuruman, which is your JTG, your John Taulo Haitsewe, Uppington, your ZF Macau. Apologies. And those districts, all in all, constitute about almost 60% of our population in the Northern Cape, which is about almost 760,000 people. But for the purpose of this, that doesn't. And broadly, all these districts are youthful, have youthful populations. So meaning we as development planners, we should also be mindful of the future and say, what's going to happen to this population that is not necessarily finding expression anywhere else. The gentleman from NetBank is not here anymore. But this is just a slide of growth of all the three districts I alluded to. And the John Taulo Haitsewe, because of the nature of its economy, its growth tends to be more selecting, tends to be more prone to global economic events. And like I earlier alluded to the fact that it's a large mining area, and most of its produce is exported outside. Prof was talking to the Vescas, the West Coast, and if you are in Saldanha in any time and your shoes are red, just know that you have iron ore on your feet, and it's from Katu and Kuruma. That's how. So we tend to export most of that. So it's also the external shocks tend to impact it. This slide just shows the stress index of all this district. And if you look at this one that is elevated, is the JTG, the one I'm talking to, which is more prone to external shocks. And you can tell by the heightened stress index of almost 80. So meaning, if you are in JTG, you are by extension working in mining. We don't necessarily have to interrogate you. By extension, you literally work in mines. Or you know of, the next person you know is in mining. This next session, I'll talk to the findings of the study, just to in terms of our survey, we interviewed about 149, almost 150 people, and there were refusals. You know, when you go to townships and township stores, you'd find that you find people from elsewhere, and they are not so very welcoming, because you look at me and you're thinking, hey, you should be working for the special branch, and so you tend not to be as accommodative to me as you would to one of my colleagues or the two of my colleagues. So we had some refusals in terms of some of the proposed interviewees, and they refused to participate in the study, which we couldn't belabor, and we had to proceed. But the majority of the people that we interviewed with this study were male, and about a third were female, or just a little over a third. And the bulk were from the Pixley Kaseme district, Most of the businesses that we interviewed were not necessarily registered. And obviously, this could be, by extension, those that are not legal. And I heard myself, I said, not legal. I've had sessions with people who said, I do not necessarily have the papers to be here, and you cannot do anything else. So they are not registered, and the majority were also, for Pixley Kaseme, were sole proprietors or sole owners of their businesses. We found this slide a bit interesting that most of our interviewees were either between 2 and 4 years in terms of their business operation, and others were over 10 years in terms of their operations, which for us was also a startling revelation. And obviously, there were those who were between 5 and 7 years in terms of their operation. We also asked the question on the impact of COVID. And the majority noted that there was an impact of COVID on their businesses. They couldn't operate, majority of them. And those who we interviewed were those with a yearly income or revenue generation of less than 300,000 a year. So meaning your small businesses. And it turned out to be also an issue of no response. Yes, you might interview a person, and as soon as you get to the question of how much do you make a year, they become a bit deflective, if I were to use that word. So they tend not to be as forthcoming in terms of how much they make with their businesses. Like Ntate alluded to the fact that there was SMME relief fund that was issued in 2020 just to assist those operating businesses. And the majority did not receive that funding. But obviously, as an interviewer or a researcher, you also make your own observations. And I could tell that the majority were not necessarily in the know. Like, and that is one of his recommendations, is that there should be more, the extension of workshops as well as sessions should be extended to those that are in the township or in the periphery of the formal economy. Colleagues, the title says Northern Cape Township Enterprises, what it entails and support needed. And for us, this was a critical question because we have tools, we have avenues that we could assist the township enterprises as a department. This is me talking to economic development. And the majority responded to this question with finance. So every other interviewee or business owner that we interviewed, they said to us they required finance as their most pressing need. And obviously this is at the back of 2020 when we had COVID-19. So it was also a bit of a stretch for them having to make ends meet. So they needed finances. Even those who needed material, they will also always say, I need it so that I can procure my machine. I need the finance for this and that reason. I won't go into everyone, but this is generally the sentiment that we could gather from our analysis. Dr. Mukwena. Dr. Mukwena is not there, and he's talking to PhD econometrics. Some of us are talking grade 8, standard 6 econometrics. So this one is based on the data that we collected, the 150 people that we surveyed. There were other questions that were still pressing from our engagements, whether with our principals. So in terms of the retail shops, which was our major clientele in terms of the study, we saw that there is a positive effect on the spaza shops, granted where they procure their goods and services or their supplies. Also, what was positive was also the customer. I talked earlier to the issue of people or the solidarity amongst. So it also emanated in terms of this simplistic general linear modeling. We also saw that there is the annual revenue, as much as it was not necessarily, the people were not forthcoming, but it reflected as a potential for elevating or sustaining the spaza shops. The hair salon barber shops were also one of our most prominent businesses that we interviewed. And also similar to the, no, not similar. Their longevity was also a factor when we were modeling. The longer a barber or a hair care specialist was in existence, the longer the ability of their business to be sustained. And for me, it was more of an anecdotal experience. How many of us go to the same hair salon? How many of us, go for the same person to do your manicures and your pedicures? The same person. So the longer a business stayed, the longer it was also, and this was also highlighted by the last one there, the primary customers, which tended to be those in the vicinity. But where they procured their supplies and where they banked was actually a negative. There was no positive effect from those. So meaning Nedbank will have to develop strategies to lure barbershops as well as salons. And obviously, given the rural nature of the Northern Cape, you'll find that most of the barbershops, salons, they procure their hair care products in Bloem, funny enough, and others would go to Johannesburg just to procure their. So for me, this was also a test for us to check the robustness of what we would uncover from the survey itself. We also discovered that car washes tended to have an elevated revenue stream. And as a researcher, you also use anecdote. You also use your own lived experience. And for me, I tended to believe that they also tended to pronounce more on how much they got, but not necessarily be a true factor. But what was also surprising for us was that the primary customers, unlike for retail, were not necessarily for revenue generation. So many people that they sold to were not necessarily be elevating their revenue streams. So meaning what I'm saying is that solidarity, my business is kept just by proximity, but not necessarily what they buy, or they are making me rich, or something like that. Longevity is also a factor because we wanted to also understand how long could the business be there for. And we tended to understand that revenue was a factor in terms of how long the business will be in existence. So meaning your business might not necessarily be in existence for long if your revenue streams is not necessarily significant. And like I said, I needed to be short. More than 40% of the businesses that we interviewed were majority spaza shops. And like I said earlier, the barber shops also came into the fore, and bottle stores. And these were the ones who were affected by the restrictions in 2020. These are some of our recommendations, and this way the bulk are actually being used in our TREP submission, the Township and Rural Economy Program submission, as well as the vehicle that we've developed as a department in terms of dispersing finances to to the businesses in the province. And these were some of the establishments that we visited. The workshop is in Kuruman. You can see one of my colleagues there interviewing one of the gentlemen who owns a car wash in Pavalelo, Uppington. This one is the Colesburg Love Life supermarket, as well as another one in, this one was also still in Colesburg. And with that, Kia lebo.
Thank you very much, Ndate Matludi. Another round of applause, colleagues, for that was our last speaker. I'm not going to waste time, colleagues. We will just go straight to the Q&A session. You might as well, Ndate Matludi, don't go far. Come to the warm seats here. They are not hot, they are just warm. Come here. With Ndate Chulufelo. So that I think your advantage is that you'll be closer to the door because we are about to conclude just now. Colleagues, those were the three presentations, one by Dr. Mokoena. He has already left. If you have any questions regarding his presentation, his work, you can still raise those questions tomorrow. I'm sure you have noted some. Let's reserve them for tomorrow when he's back. So it's Ndate Chulufelo, Ndate Mohau, colleagues, by show of hands. I've noted Dr. OJ, Abutimpo, my colleague from National School of Government, Ndate from Agric. Me, you are also noted, Auspinki. Colleagues, it will seem your presentations were very interesting. There are a lot of hands. Ndate Lifuma will be the last one. Colleagues, in that order, Dr. OJ, let's start.
Thank you, Program Director. And the presentation were logically done. Thank you for a beautiful presentation by both presenters and that of Dr. Mokoena. I actually ran after him to answer some of the question that I have in my mind with regards to his work. Now, I think I will start from the bottom up. Ndate Matludi, you've done a wonderful work, and I like the way you support your qualitative survey, with a small line, quantitative, that survey, results which substantiate your findings. But then, I just want to just observe that, given that when you look at the barber shops, your results were quite statistically significant, right? And you said you will find a negative relationship between where those barber shops, the cost suppliers, all right, there's a negative relationship, and the banking access, all right? I don't know the specific word. So I'm just thinking that, why don't you think that is the access, the accessibility to banking or finance that might explain that negative relationship? I just want to hear your idea on that because it did not come out in your presentation. Because, of course, then again, it leads to your next slide that was talking about sustainability and revenue. It makes sense intuitively. If you don't have more revenue, your business will not be, will not live long. So my question there is, how do you think, given the limitation, now thinking of access to finance that this sponsorship or informal economy face, how do you think this sustainability in terms of revenue can be improved? That's my second question for you. Then, Mr. Modirapula, thank you very much for your work. I just want to say it's a good master dissertation you've done. If it is still a manuscript, I think you should publish it because it's a good work for a provincial level that, you can have published it maybe in a C grade, no publication, but it's not a thing. I'm just encouraging you not to sit on it. And Ndate Matludi, he knows the criticism already. And what do I want to say? You could have improved your result, your anecdotal findings, because there's argument that when you have a qualitative survey, there is a sampling inaccuracy and the reliability, in that survey. So if you apply maybe a smaller and not very minor, analysis like probit or logit, or you use principal component factors, they're very simple in SPSS to support the findings. Although you have small sample, but this will help you to get your paper to be published. But I say you should not sleep on that paper. It's a very good finding, which needs a good exposure on that one. Now, my question is this. Of course, you mentioned, I like your recommendations, that it shows that you're an academic. But one thing is this, when you sit with the MECs, you sit with the HOD, they want to ask you, what is the time frame, or how easy is the implementation if you want to integrate the informal sector into the so-called formal sector? I don't want to argue on that one. How do you think that integration can take place? Can it be a short time, a medium-term plan, or a long term, particularly for Free State Province? All right, sir. Now, the second one is this, and I like it when you said it. There's a significant fiscal leakage because informal sector is being ignored. For an example, they don't pay revenue. They don't pay taxes. And that is a huge, fiscal leakage that if government, the provincial government is, collecting that taxes, we will use it to finance maybe the project that we have in the province. So my question for you is that, how do you think that the tap of this fiscal leakage, how can it be closed at an informal level, informal sector level? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much. Maybe I need to change the approach, and thank both the presenters and Ntate Mokoena for the beautiful job you have done. Philosophers define the world and its problem, but unfortunately they can't change, or they are unable to change, or even provide a solution to the problem. Now, particularly in Tadetolo, continue with the beautiful work you are doing. I really am inspired. But if we can look from 1890 to 1990, how the South African white government and apartheid government from 1948 empowered white people economically to be where they are today, will not embrace this thing of called township economy. We'll be ashamed of ourselves. And one thing that I loved that we said, it's a funded, sponsored ILO concept that is not in touch with the South African black problem. It's not contextual. It's the same as the OBE and other concepts that were transported to South Africa today. They have failed. Let's come up with something that is related and contextual to the South African problem, the black problem. And one of the things, and in conclusion, just as in yesterday, I take a group of white business people who are saying, we see what you are doing in our community. Sewage spillages, blah, 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 blah. We want to come and help. But then at the end of the day, we realize that we cannot be able to achieve this on our own without bringing these people in partnership with the municipality in Mangaung. And guess what? No one has time. They are bringing even solutions on how you can take Mangaung out of its financial problem, including the so-called LED strategies that are not working in Mangaung. Now, you go to the very same CBD, 85% of those people who own those small survivalist enterprises for the sake of us understanding each other, I don't believe they are enterprises, are foreign people. Foreign people. Mangaung Hawkers Association stood up to request the support from Mangaung. Ne? But only to find that those particular ranta parties and so on, they are not even owned by our own people here. Now, where's the local economic development? Now, I'm saying it is time that our government must deliberately take a bold decision that we are investing in empowering our people economically and not selectively and not according to the brotherhood and so on and or by association. But basically, we do that if we can bring all these dogs first together under one roof, we'll be able to compete with Capitec and other major banks that will empower our people financially to participate. And I'm not apologetic about that. The only way of us talking about the economy is us seeing ourselves in the Johannesburg Stocks Exchange. And that's practical, that is possible. But our own technocrats are being used against us to block us to get into that mainstream, and it cannot be correct.
Thank you, colleagues. Mine is a short one, not like Mpoyi, but it's an extension of what Mpoyi said. Well, your presentations touch the nerve because township economy itself is a challenge. Recently, there is a development in the rural areas. I'm from Limpopo. The Pakistanians are buying stands from the kings. They are doing that because they are one solid business forum of some sort, which we cannot. But then the issue is within your studies, both of you, I don't hear the element of legislative environment, whether it was entertained, specifically from the user's point of view. Because I don't see us dealing with a small portion where we say during COVID there was some sort of a funding. But we need to ask a question further to say, what after COVID? What is the government doing? Maybe we need to take it further through all the studies to say, you see this thing of having us filling the stadiums doesn't work for us anymore. We need to go back to the communities, whether as departments, various departments, or as government in totality, because this is where we're going to arrest the policy formulation, and we're going to arrest some issues pertaining to this. This is a very thing. I like the fact that you even said global-wise township economy produces 2 billion, but where is this money? How do we account for this money as a country somewhere? I stay next to Tembisa. When I'm on leave, I go into Tembisa. I can tell you there's a lot of business. People are busy there. There's money flowing. There's raw exchange of money. But we don't have account. We don't account for that as a country. We need to account for that as a country. And legislation needs to come in to assist us. And in a robust environment, we need to start really, politicians need to change the way they think in South Africa. Because, you know, there was one example during the break when one colleague of ours said, you know, even the population knows next day's elections, they do things deliberately because they know you cannot call them to order. We need to change that environment. Thank you, colleagues.
No, thank you, colleagues. Can we take Auspinky? Let's take you then. That will be the first round. We allow the colleagues to respond, then we take the second round.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, colleagues. Mine is, my question is with regards to, actually the comments and the questions is with regards with Mr. Mudirapula. Yes, thank you for your presentation. That it seems very well, according to my view. Also, we seem to progress very well on street trading, as you alluded on to say it's at 46%. Yes, that's good. Now coming to the investment, which I think you can maybe highlight on it to elaborate, to say how does it attract investment? If you can elaborate on that one also. And why am I asking this is because how can the investors invest in the street trading and so forth? Yeah, and whereas they don't contribute to the SA tax or to SARS. That's my question. And about payment of tax, in order to contribute, maybe I would say or suggest that adding to the recommendations, how are they going to work on that in terms of paying tax? What is it that you are recommending in terms of payment of tax, yes, to SARS? And adding to the recommendation again would be on the investment. What is it that you are recommending in terms of to work towards attracting the investors? And I thank you so much. Maybe the last one is on your summary. Actually, I took a photo on it, the summary of your findings. In your main findings, and it was about under the challenges. I think so. Let me quickly go. Yeah, under your main findings, on your summary of findings slide, you also mentioned the issue of issues with business registration because they are afraid to register their business because of that. What is it that you are recommending for them to contribute as well? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bafana, you can assist with the colleagues, you can respond. Then we'll have the last round. I'm sure, I think we have we had 3 hands, so we'll take those 3 hands, then we will close. Thank you. Bafana, yes, a bit.
Okay, thank you, colleagues, for your comments. I really appreciate them because of the level that I am at in terms of my studies and research-wise. Starting with Ospinki in terms of how do we get investors to invest in the informal economy? Unfortunately, the bus starts with the municipality. The bus starts with the bylaws that we have in place. Most of our informal traders, they feel like as long as the municipality is not doing its part, they will never do their part also. Service delivery is a concern for informal traders as well. Now, in terms of investment, once the municipality creates an environment where informal businesses can also thrive, if I can use the term, then we can get investors investing in the informal economy. And then I think that answers 2 questions, Ospinki, in terms of attracting investment. And in terms of them paying tax, our people are not informed well enough. So we need to get a point where we provide education workshops to them as far as paying tax, how do they pay tax, and what is in store for them. Because remember, a lot of them, they rely to cash to mouth. They feel like they are not already making enough. So if you tax them, what are you taking exactly from them? So they feel we need to ensure that we educate them enough in order for them to pay tax, in order for them to see that if I pay tax, these are the benefits. And unfortunately, even for those in the formal economy, they still question, why am I paying tax if government is not doing this? So we need to get to a point where we actually communicate with the people and show them the benefits of doing something for the country and for the general population. And then, in the day before,
come here, Julie. Okay.
In terms of the legislation, there were strategies put in place. In terms of the policy, there's no specific policy dealing with the informal economy, which is the problem as it is. However, there was a informal business growth strategy that was put in place. But then, as with other policies in South Africa, implementation is a problem. So we need to deal with implementation first before we can go and deal with in terms of policies. Because how can we come up with a policy when the old one did not work? We need to go back and see what did not work there. In my classes, I like to say that in South Africa and as far as municipalities, we have ABC until to Z policies or municipal bylaws. For each letter that you want, there's a policy for it, but implementation is lacking. All policies will tell you about the economy, the social, the environment, and so on, but nothing is being done. So we need to go back to the municipality also, but then we need to recognize the role of provincial government in policy making and policy implementation. And then, Ntatempo, there was a question or a comment from you that I did not get exactly. Ntatempo, I'm saying there was a comment or a question that I did not get exactly from you. Or ILO, okay, now I remember. In terms of the definition, I did ask our traders and even our officials to give us their own definition of the informal economy. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially informal traders, don't even know what the informal economy is. Now, it does come back to what Ntatempo said, that it is a foreign concept for us. We don't even know the meaning of that. We only see people operating in the street and saying that there are people selling on the street and that's it. People selling veggies and that's it. So I agree with Ntatempo that we need to come up with our own definition as far as the informal economy is exactly. Because also of the history of South Africa and what is happening in South Africa. And then, Prof at the back there mentioned, as far as the transition, am I correct? Short term and so on. We need to come up with long-term decision strategies. Short-term things are only for now. We see it even in our daily lives. A short-term thing is for now, not for tomorrow. So in terms of the informal economy, like I said, we need sustainable development. We need to make sure that the economy is inclusive. And inclusivity goes well hand in hand with sustainable things. So by creating a long-term thing, we do also recognize what will happen in future and bring it together close to us, and so that we can reach the level that we want in terms of development. I don't know if I've answered all the questions correctly. Fiscal leakage. How can that be closed? Could you please just repeat the question again so that I can?
How do you think we can improve that situation?
That situation?
Yes, so that government can be able to optimally collect its revenue. Yes, sir.
I think it goes back to the question that Spinky also asked about the municipality and what is this? Attracting investment. When I said the bus starts with the municipality, we need to develop a framework that will allow us to tap into the potential of the informal sector. So I think to answer your question, it's all about the framework and the implementation also.
OJ, fortunately, I'm not the only one who calls you Prof, so I hear Tati also calling you Prof there. So, your questions. Look, we ventured on the modeling to understand critically what our information was, or the data was saying to us. And for me, as someone who was also on the field as well, I can safely assure you that most of our barber shops or small hairstylists tended to procure their supplies from either the Free State, sometimes even the Western Cape and Gauteng. So that could also impact on their ability of the business, as well as also the ability to access banking. Look, and I'm being candid here. Like I said, I was on the field. It wasn't like I'm seated in my huge office. Look, the majority of the people that we interviewed did not necessarily bank. You know, there are those things that you tend to not necessarily want to unpack. But they did not necessarily bank, but they intimated that they would be willing to. And for me, it was also anecdotal, because in the fact that most of them were not necessarily from the country. As we all know, who are the biggest players in our township enterprises, whether it's Kakamas or wherever out there in the country, a small town in Limpopo, like Ndate said, you'll find people from elsewhere. So they tended not to bank. And most of them, they tended to have someone else who they report to, who might not necessarily be in Northern Cape, who might be Cape Town or even Johannesburg. All they said that they give it to them, the money. So they tended not to be so authoritative in terms of where they bank or how do they bank. So yes, I understand the question of access to the banks, but also I'm also, having been there, I also understand that they could also potentially not necessarily be forthcoming in terms of their operations as well. Thank you for that. On the question of regulation, and look, this one tends to talk to us. I'm a practitioner, so we tend to be the ones who are actually failing the township, the township enterprises. And whilst he posed the question, because yes, he makes an example of Limpopo, where they talk to a chief. But even in our bigger towns, metropolitans, there is also a mini chief that they talk to, that sells them their RDP and say, no, you can utilize my RDP. What are we enforcing? Because as a department, economic development, we're also supposed to be on the field also enforcing that, as well as your LED officers in municipalities. They should also be enforcing and trying to understand what is actually happening with this township enterprises. And we are not doing that. And fortunately, like in that study in terms of the informal economy, we've also done it in the province. I still remember that we started off in Kimberley, in the CBD of Kimberley. And most of the people we interviewed in that CBD were from elsewhere. Ghanaians were the majority. We actually thought it would have been Nigerians, but it was actually Ghanaians as well as Tanzanians as well as Malawians who were in the CBD of Kimberley. So we also need to be doing that reference check with ourselves, that we're actually not implementing the bylaws. Yes, we submitted the report to the Colloquium municipality. This is back 2016, I believe. And what has come of that, probably still gathering dust till this day. Those were my questions. Today, here's a follow-up.
Okay.
Sure. So that's just to refine the answer, and I appreciate that. But then the second question is, you find, if I recollect, please, I stand corrected, no effect or a negative effect between revenue, yes, inverse relationship between revenue and business sustainability, right, at informal level. So my question is, as a practitioner or as an advisor, what do you think, how can that be improved over time? Thank you, sir.
In terms of my own intuition with regard to your question is that for a business to be sustainable, it has to be also vibrant. It also has to be meeting the needs of the very same community that, because in terms of our analysis, it was that the primary customers tended to be the ones that kept the business. Thus, I talked to, in my earlier slides, to the concept of solidarity. They tended to be the custodians of the very same business, you know. So yes. Obviously, if they were to expand, but having been on the field, I can certainly assure you that there was no ambition of expanding beyond the very same. So obviously, if you expand, the economies of scale also talk to your ability to generate substantive revenue.
No, thank you very much. Colleagues, sake of brevity, can we shoot? Prof, your hand is up. Oh, yeah. I think my colleague here, and the Telefuma, and my lady there, then we're done. Oh. Pilot.
I think I think most of the questions that I needed to ask were actually answered. But I can just say to Datima, he needs to be very careful when he undertakes a mixed method approach, in the sense that he may have to do data triangulation, and I could not get that from his methodology. Even in terms at the level of data analysis on the qualitative side, I was expecting to hear from him how he perhaps analyzed data. Yes, on the quantitative side he was very clear, but I wasn't very sure on the qualitative side in terms of the themes or first or second order codes. But between the two of them, I think they can find each other, because I think they are beginning to be fooled by ILO with this whole notion of township economy. Gentlemen, that's absolute nonsense in modern literature to still be referring to township economy, because in Geneva, Switzerland, where that ILO is, there are no townships. It's just a sponsored thing, like your RET forces telling you about white monopoly capital. But I'm happy to get the definition that suggests that yes, this is the kind of an informal economy. It might be informal because the ruling party itself is also failing to regulate those people, or they have failed to create an environment where people can thrive. And now they are even afraid to go tell the taxi guys that you cannot operate here, you cannot run a tavern here. Enyobeni will not have happened in East London. Call it informal business, call it an illegal tavern, call it whatever, give it whatever name you want. But it's because of the failing state. It's because of our authorities failing to nip certain things in the bud. It's because of our state failing to tell people, do not do this, that we now don't have a parliament in Cape Town, and somebody will tell you about some white woman that she hates blacks and that and that and that. We are misleading each other as a bunch of blacks, and we should not allow that. So there's no story about township economy, because these things were created during apartheid through the Group Areas Act. And you referred to Kenya. Kenya, if you go look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, GEM, you look at the total early stage in terms of the economic activity. It does not appear anywhere else. In fact, Sudan is number 2 if you go Google now. So if you would have referred to Kenya as your international context of your study, it would have been misplaced. Perhaps you would have looked at Morocco, Egypt, and perhaps Sudan, which is number 2. In South Africa, I think we are number 11 of the 47 countries, with Brazil being number 1. But all in all, what I'm saying is perhaps it's time for us to be honest towards one another to say that certain things are becoming a problem to us. Some speakers referred here to issues of the fiscus bleeding. The fiscus is bleeding because we are failing to go and force bylaws, regulations on these people so that they must pay taxes. Now, some of us who are working, we must be paying these taxes. We are afraid of these people. We know they are operating illegal businesses. There is a failing conception and understanding that car washes are viable in townships. Those guys are not paying for that water that we're paying so hard for. You know, they've got all the illegal connections there, and at every street corner, you've got a car wash. And we're being told that at least it has employed 3 people, 4 people. It's because of the failure of the ruling party to nip it in the bud. But all in all, I like your study. I would have expected your study under the aim to come up with a tool that will ensure or that will regulate the actual establishment and or operations of these people, whom you refer to as informal traders, so that we can at least get something for a fiscus. But at this stage, we're not controlling these people there. They're running the country. We are failing. But it's a good study. It's a good study that which you are having, and do not be fooled by those kawashis there by solchitis. Is it like or solchitis because of what the bottles, but they're not really profitable. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, let's give it to the lady. Between us and our supper, those few questions and your answers, colleagues. I'm saying for supper for high.
Ekaite Benedict from the Department of Business Management and the UOF's Business School at the University of the Free State. So I do recognize all the different schools of thoughts and opinions, and I think that this is also, when we talk about the informal economy, it's a very controversial concept or definition. But then I think my question is for David also concerning your research. I think both presenters, the research, very important. Unfortunately, for lack of a better word or context, this is the reality that we are facing. Due to our history, yes, definitely, we've got townships, and business does take place in township. Entrepreneurial activities do take place in township, and we need to document them. And for lack of a better word or lack of a better classification, so we as academics, then we just fall back on what we see as the reality, and we end up talking about them as township economy. Of course, I do understand where my esteemed colleagues are coming from, that it is important to move this economy to the mainstream economy. But at the same time, if we could have at the back of our mind that when we refer to township economy, we do not necessarily mean that it is like second-class economy or inferior to the mainstream. So I think another thing is with the presenters, could you differentiate between an informal economy and township economy? Because I see we use them interchangeably, and sometimes they are not necessarily the same thing. We could have a township economy, but it may not necessarily be an informal business. So maybe that would appease some of us on the other side of the fence. Probably if we could find a way without terming all the businesses that are operating in the township as informal businesses, because it's not the case. But if we could find ways in which we could promote the informal businesses to become formal forms of businesses, but there will always be need in the township. People will always want goods and services. So when we focus on it as academics, we are just basically saying, how can we find better ways of producing and supplying quality goods and services to people who live in the township? But I do understand, I think this would continue to be a very controversial subject, very controversial topic, but we are owning it as academics. We just do not have a better classification or a better way to actually explain or categorize those businesses that take place in the township. So I don't know if that makes sense. But could you also try and differentiate it? Almost every business that takes place in the township, yes, is part of the township economy, but not every business in the township that operates in the township economy is an informal business. If you could just make sure you have that demarcation and differentiate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ntatele Fuma. Yes, but you are correct. There is trade going on in those townships. It's an issue of how, earlier on, Ntate from NetBank also raised the same issue, the classification. What do we call it? But there's money exchanging hands there. It's a huge trade going on. Ntate Fuma.
Thanks, Ntate Mngoma. I think I'm partially answered, Ntate Mngoma, as my question was raised by the participant from the floor, and also partially responded by Ntate Tsulufelo, as it was going to be on the issue of the Triple M, their response on the ever-increasing illegal foreign traders. What is their strategy and how are they going to ensure that there is a minimal or they regulate the space correctly? So I think it was related to that. So I am not going to go further on it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much, colleagues. Let's then respond. Oh, hey, Bra Pilot. I was with you in Mpumalanga. How can I forget you?
This, but it's fine. Program director, I'm tempted to speak. I thought today I'm not going to say anything. But yeah, thanks for the good studies. And don't feel terrible when you get criticized constructively, because I can see that one of my colleagues here was very strong, but I'm going to be more stronger than him, unfortunately. Yeah, one. I've got, I think, about 6 points, but I'm going to be very short, program director. One, both of your studies, I did not hear much, or maybe I'm under, I might be under correction here. I didn't hear anything in your parameters trying to measure, the succession. I didn't hear, unless I'm starting to be corrected, but I didn't hear anything. So why I'm asking this, we're talking township here. Or are we talking our own so-called black economy? Let's just put it that way. I guess that's where we are. But then how do we see the succession of these businesses? Or part of your study, have you looked at the previous history? How far has the business started, enterprise started, so as to see how it can then become self-sustainable? That's one. You'll answer that, both of you, because I didn't hear that. Now, let's come to the issue of foreign, when we're discussing here, this articulation, foreign nationals, how. The reality of the matter here is, we are not, there's no foreign whatever here. I mean, we're supposed to be calling each other Afro-nationals or something. But what is this foreign? What are we talking about? Is that thing that my colleague on the extreme left, is not of course left wing, but extreme left, was indicating. This was something that was created, whether through those systems that were there. I don't want to mention, you know what I'm talking about. How Tina as Azanians, people in the South, I'm not talking about the South Africa, there's no certain called South Africa. I don't know, maybe you are lost. How do we as Azanians try to make sure that we understand who we are. Oh, what is our background? What is it that we've been doing right before? Before this thing of democracy. I mean, of course, I was still very young, but I'm now, yeah, but I understand what was happening. So what I'm trying to say is, what is it that we've been doing right so that we stop pointing fingers of to these people that we're calling them foreign nationals, how they are doing things better. We used to do even things better than them. Am I wrong? Those that were there, unless if you're BT, they call it those that are born after technology or something. So most of us born before technology. So what I'm trying to say here is, what is it that we've been doing right? One, you are we used to have let's say master in the previous whatever. These businesses that we are talking about, our people in the olden days, if you go back and read, despite the fact that we are being, most of these literatures that we are talking about, I agree with you. You know, we are too much Western. You know, we are too much North. We tend to leave what we are good at as us. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, when you look at these studies, and you say, these people, these other people, do you know what is it that we're doing right? We've been doing right. And those things, if we then, part of our study, we continue and say, let's look into these parameters and make sure that then when we recommend to an extent that then we are able to say, how do we move from where we are, taking into cognizance the previous, and then moving forward. I think this is what the studies must go towards, that as we are really doing rigorous evaluation, R&D work. Now, my next point here is the issue of, you know, these services, this thing of, it comes on, you know, we're talking about, I can see my colleague from Treasury has left. I don't know that is left or, but this thing of tax to these survivalists, I agree with you, my extreme. Survivalists, these people are survivalists, but you're talking tax, and you're not saying the tax must not be collected. But the issue here is, how do we make sure that we try to, you know, fade off or sort of wrap off from the minds of our people? Remember, before 1994, how we managed to, you know, get the system off. One of the big, strongest system that we applied was what you call consumer boycott. You know that, ne? Now, have we went back and then tried to, you know, like, sort of remove this thing from the minds of our people to say, now it's time for us now to take responsibility. We have not done that. Am I right? So if we've not done that, what is it that must be done? Part of our work is to say, of course, we always putting a blame at the government, but I'm saying this is a systematic problem. It's not a government alone. It's not a private. It's not the communities. Because the next point that I'm going to raise is supporting this very same currently in our policies, SMMEs, which is, I don't know what is this SMMEs, but what kind of the banking system do we have? We're talking stocks, we're talking all these things. Are we afraid to be rigorous? Are we afraid to be bold enough, to be audacious enough to say, we as South Africans now, we are going to support our own people? Do we have a bank that supports SMMEs here? Is there any SMME bank in South Africa? Because we're all going to the commercial banks. Am I right? So if that is the case, are we afraid? I know I'm not the chairperson, this is a treasury thing, and I know I'm talking to Mr. Pess here, or our honorable Mrs. Pess who are sitting next to me here. But the fact of the matter is, as long as we are not getting bold enough to say, as South Africans, let's just make a decision. You know, you go to other countries, and let me tell you a very nice short issue here. When Rwanda took over in 1990, I think it was 1996, because there was a genocide. When we got democracy here, in June, they were killing each other. More than almost 1 million people died. Some of you might have been there. But let me tell you a story. How Rwanda turned around its situation to be where it is today. Currently, Rwanda is the number one, its economy is the highest in Africa so far, the growth rate. About 4 or 5 years ago, it was 14% growth rate, GDP. Do you know where, and as we speak now, it's sitting at 8%. But imagine those people who are killing each other. Do you know what is it that we are failing to come, and it's exactly what the MEC said here. I think it's the MEC. When you do our studies, are we afraid to recommend based on our findings to say, really we need to come up with something different? And that's the reason for these colloquiums. Colloquia. One of them is this. There's also national ones. So we must recommend and say, based on the the findings or learnings from other countries, if Rwanda, such a small country, is able to turn its economy like this, we go to Rwanda today, there is no child that goes to bed hungry. None. Here in South Africa, how many millions of people are going to bed hungry? At the same time, they will rather go and queue for 350 rand rather than go and work. Let's be brutally honest. I'm a public servant, and I'm not afraid to become unpopular, because you need to say the truth. And the truth, and I like what our Honorable MEC said, because I know she's a technocrat. She's correct. We came here together in 2014. We came here to this province together. But I can tell you that if you're not brutally honest and you're not doing things right, we'll not get these things right. When we do our studies, let's not try and please anybody. Somebody said this morning, the study, you may get things, outputs that are not what you're expecting. So that's a good thing. I think it's Prof this morning, if I'm not wrong. So all that I'm saying is, based on the things that, the parameters that they were talking about here, there's a number of parameters, good work. Most of it, of course, is subjective, what you call qualitative studies. But I can tell you that, of course, there's much on the quantitative as well. But what I want us to do is that let's take these studies further. And maybe in 2-3 years down the line, then we come up, recommend some things that are able to can take our small businesses in all spheres. It doesn't matter who you are, in which sphere, whether you are in the processing, or you are in the production, or you are in the sale, as most of their studies are in services. But what is critical is that let's recommend things that will be able to take our people out of this poverty that we are finding ourselves at, because they are survivalists. So I can see a lot, Chairperson, and let me just
I'm closing you now.
and say thank you very much for the work well done. Thank you.
No, thank you, colleagues. Colleagues, you can respond, but we'll also give you a leeway, because I know you are here with us tomorrow. Those that you are not able to respond to, you can still talk to them tomorrow. So it's up to you.
Sober minds.
Hmm?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, you can engage, but we'll also want to benefit from the responses. That's the reason we are together. You can summarize, but those that we have not touched, colleagues, you can still respond to them tomorrow.
I think at this moment, the question I can answer is from
Memo.
Mel at the back.
Okay.
In terms of differentiating between township economy and the informal economy, because yes, it is true that some of the businesses in the township are actually regulated and not necessarily into the informal economy. So I think in terms of the difference between the two, it's all about what is regulated and what is not. But then I think the challenge is, I think that they also noted it down that when you approach these people, they don't even want to engage with you in order to say, are you regulated or not? And we need to remember that most of these businesses are now owned by, now I'm scared of saying foreign nationals, because that they will.
No, don't be.
So I think that's where I can actually say, in terms of the other comments,
tomorrow, okay.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thanks, colleagues. It's working, eh? Oh, thanks, me. In terms of our study, we were very deliberate. We did not talk to informal. I don't know if you saw, there's a slide where I talked to private businesses, sole proprietors, trust, all those. So they are not necessarily informal. So meaning we also engage with Pick and Pay. Even you can also even see it in terms of the revenue streams. Because we'll find that the majority were in between 0 to 300,000 a year, and then it jumps to over 10 million. So for us, we were very deliberate. We understood that it does not necessarily talk to informal only. We have done studies on informal, like I alluded earlier, that also left. But I'm RET. I'm RET. I can proudly say it. Radical economic transformation. So we need to change the economy. So I cannot necessarily be you know, if you were to look at the economic history of South Africa, where does it start from? It's Minerals Energy Complex. All of us, I grew up in Belfontein. It's in Literally Putswa district, this province. I'm in Kimberley now. It's mining still. So that mineral energy complex for me still permeates, still is in existence. So how do we then change and make sure that we participate there? You know, I was arguing the other day that a few years back, a former mayor of Warden, I'm not saying names, but if you understand the politics of the country, you'll understand that he was the minister of minerals then. He instituted a policy, the MPRDA, that talked to 30% going to the previously disadvantaged. And us, the very same people, we lambasted him. And he said, no, keep it the way it was. Most of the people who are considered black or previously disadvantaged were the very same ones who did not necessarily want to partake, because he was also labeled as can I call it, an ace man, or a Zuma man, or an RAT force. So if we talk changing the landscape of our economy, those are the critical questions that we need to talk to. That in terms of succession, I also did a modeling exercise. We looked at the variables that will lead to the longevity of an entrepreneurship in the township. So there are variables that tend to be more robust for the long-term survival of a business. And we were also deliberate. Yes, in terms of my own anecdotes and my own observations, I talked to the fact that I interviewed people from elsewhere. But in terms of our study, we did not necessarily say, how many foreigners did we interview? No, we don't. We talk to township enterprises. We do not necessarily talk to a foreigner or or someone from elsewhere. Taxes, though, like I said earlier in my previous response, we have all this legislations. We all have all these entities as well as government institutions that should enforce, but it's not necessarily enforcing. And until us in the public service take a stance and say, you know what, we need to take a concerted effort and make sure that we arrest this, call it tax evasion, for lack of a better word, that we should actually go in. We can even approach SARS and say, what is your strategy? Home Affairs, how do we make sure that we can leverage from those? Rwanda, that one will talk. We'll have a quick session. I don't know when, because I'm hitting the road now. But we'll have a session on Rwanda. You know, I'm reminded of one RAT gentleman. A few years, they used to make a cartoon of him with the shower. And he said, give me 1 day. 1 day so that I can turn this. Because there's also these contestations. Paul has that leeway. Paul Kagame has that leeway. We should also be appreciative of our own democracy. President Jacob Zuma said, give me 1 day so that I can turn the country. Because he knew the kind of democracy that we have does not allow him to do as he pleases. There, I pause.
No, thank you very much, colleagues. I will encourage you, if you present a paper and it invokes so much discussions, contestations, and so forth, you must pride yourself that you have done good work. So there were lot of inputs, constructive criticism, and so forth. So it really means it's an interesting topic. I think it started earlier, township economy. It ended with you now. It started very early, presentation and net bank and so forth. So it's an interesting issue, topic that I'm sure will even take it further in terms of discussion. Even tomorrow as we take breaks, we'll talk about this issue. You are correct, Dr. OJ raised the issue of fiscal leakages within that economy that is contested. you know, as long as these things are not formalized, you'll always have fiscal leakages because they are not formalized, they are not regulated. It's just you get a puma. There are no barriers. You come in and you go out. You take money outside of the country, and there's no. So I think your topics that you presented, your papers that you presented are very interesting. Colleagues, before we leave, I just wanted to clarify one thing. That one colleague also raised that the issue of the grants, the social grants. You have about 7 types of social grants. So the social grant that was referred to today is the one that we call SRD, Social Relief of Distress Grant, the 350. So that is the one that there is a possibility of it being not funded in the coming financial year. So we should not go out and say, oh, grandmothers, that everything is stopping. No. It's SRT, the 350. Colleagues, on behalf of my HOD, she wanted to be with us today, so they've spent the whole day go legislature. So message is that we must thank you very much for your time. It's very valued to us as provincial government. Your comments, your inputs, your constructive criticism, very much welcomed. And I think, remember earlier on when I started, I said we are in government. You know, we have our own blind spots. So we need someone from outside with a clear mind, maybe to remind us that you are too comfortable there. You are not doing things the correct way. So this is how you must go. You know, I always say to my colleagues that, in a little corner as a public servant, you must understand that if you are diligent in terms of doing your work, you must understand that there's poverty out there, there's unemployment, there are so many challenges, social ills, there are so many. So we are so fortunate to be to be working. That's why I get annoyed in that tempo when people don't want to work. And I always raise the issue of we are fortunate the government in 2020, 2021, when our colleagues who are working for private companies during the scourge of COVID-19, they were getting half of their salaries. They were getting quarter of their salaries. Some of them even lost their work, their jobs. And us as government officials, we paid full pay sitting at home, but you still have people in government complaining when they have to do their work. So we must count our blessings and do our work diligently. So colleagues, I think let's meet tomorrow morning. I think we're meeting at 9 o'clock. We're starting at 9, so 8:30 for 9. I'm hoping that we'll manage the time so that we finish by at least 2 o'clock. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your time and for staying until this late. I cannot thank you more than this. I think we've taken more of your time today, but just for staying with us, thank you very much. Yes, that's your one.
The presentations will be prepared, and I think when you register there, your email is very clear. Some writing, just very clear, so that once we are done, so that we just forward them to colleagues. Deliver that, yes. Deliver. Or else. My email is very simple. Just drop an email so that we can just forward.
We can even ask the colleagues to post their. No, but we'll make sure that you get them tomorrow. Yeah. We could have asked our banker to give us memory sticks, man. Yeah, please. No, thank you, colleagues.